We've got another huge game in the SEC, and it's a clash of styles. As number 3 Georgia and that Kirby Smart-led defense traveled to number 16 Ole Miss to take on Lane Kiffin's high-octane offense. This has the makings to be a very close, competitive game, but the million-dollar question is, can Ole Miss finally get over the hump and take down the top dog under Lane Kiffin? That's what we're going to find out today. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. So glad you could join us today for this massive Top 20 SEC showdown. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of those exclusive expert picks, some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers, not just this year, but each of the last 6 years as well. So if you want to win big with us for one of the lowest prices in the country, for a full year-long subscription, full 365 days, no other handicappers doing that, we want you to take advantage of it. Sign up today and become a member of our GE Nation. Again, the link for that down in the description below. So Georgia and Ole Miss, well, they don't play each other very often. At least they didn't back with the Eastern and Western divisions in the SEC. They did play last year, though. Georgia winning 52-17 in Athens. I have a feeling this game will be a little bit closer than that, a little bit more competitive than that. This is an interesting game, guys. Georgia is still one of the best teams in the country, obviously, no doubt about it. Number 3 in the initial set of college football playoff rankings, but there's this, I think, feel in the air, not just among fans, maybe among analysts as well, that Georgia maybe isn't as good as we thought they'd be or as good as they were. Ole Miss, on the other hand, they're 16th in the nation. They've already got 2 losses on their resume, but this would be huge if they could pull off this win over Georgia. It would keep their college football playoff hopes alive, and that was always the expectation under Ole Miss this season. This was kind of a playoff or bust type of year, considering that the playoff had expanded to 12 teams. A loss here practically eliminates them. A win here will see them skyrocket in the rankings and improve those odds exponentially. We start on the offensive side of the ball. Let's start with Georgia, the road team here. Look, they're not as bad as people say. I feel like people have kind of criticized Georgia's offense over these last few weeks. And they're not like great by any means, but they're not bad either. They're averaging over 430 yards per game, nearly 300 passing yards per game. I think the surprising mark is the Bulldogs' inability to run the ball effectively. They're only averaging 132 rushing yards per game. That's a pretty low number. I know they have enjoyed throwing the ball with Carson Beck. He's a phenomenal quarterback, but that's a low rushing number for Georgia. And Trevor Etienne, while I know he's been banged up quite a bit this year and currently is now, he's yet to have a 100-yard rushing game with the Bulldogs this season. That's relatively surprising. I mean, he was supposed to come in and be the workhorse and have a breakthrough year, transferring in from their rival in Florida, and that hasn't happened. So Georgia still has yet to find a little bit of balance offensively and still has been unable to run the ball extremely well. And that's a problem. They're going to need to find a way to do that going forward, especially if they want to make a playoff run. But Carson Beck's been playing well. Over 2,300 yards, 17 touchdowns on the year. He's got to cut down on his turnovers, though. That's been the biggest issue for him this season. 11 interceptions on the year, including 8 in his last 3 games. He has thrown 3 interceptions in a game 3 times this year. That includes each of his last 2 games. Each of his last 2 games, he's thrown 3 interceptions. So 9 interceptions of his 11 have come in just 3 games this year. That's not good. He's got to find a way to settle down, make better decisions, and he's definitely got to do that now against Ole Miss because you don't want to give this Ole Miss offense extra chances. Pretty much, when you commit a turnover to Ole Miss, you're basically throwing away points because more than likely the Rebels are going to take that turnover and turn it into something. Even if it's just a field goal, they're going to turn it into something. This is the number 2 offense in the nation, averaging over 550 yards per game. The number 1 passing offense in the nation, averaging over 377 passing yards per game. And they're also averaging nearly 180 on the ground. They just had a record-breaking day against Arkansas, which isn't saying that much, but regardless, an SEC conference game, 694 yards of offense, 562 passing yards against the Razorbacks. Jackson Dart thrown for over 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions, takes phenomenal care of the football, and his weapons are ridiculous. Trey Harris is obviously the workhorse, has almost 1,000 reception yards already this season, but then Caden Lee, Jordan Watkins, and Juice Wells all have over 460 reception yards on the year. They've got insane speed, they've got insane size. This is, again, one of the best offenses in the country, and it's going to be a very big test for this Georgia defense on Saturday. When you take a look at the Georgia defense, we know that's typically the strength of the Kirby Smart, right? He's I would still say, the best defensive mind in the game of college football right now. Some would put him as the best coach overall in the game of college football right now. The Bulldogs have the 12th ranked defense in the nation, allowing just 295 total yards per game, only 187 passing yards per game, 108 rushing yards per game. They've been pretty stingy on all phases of the ball. In all phases defensively, they've been pretty stingy and played very good football there. The key for them in this game is to take away some semblance of Ole Miss's balance, right? They've got to find a way to make Ole Miss somewhat one-dimensional. And honestly, if I'm Kirby Smart, I'm saying let's find a way to shut down the pass and force Ole Miss to run. They can run the ball very effectively. We know that, but God, we've got to find a way to slow down Jackson Dart. We've got to find a way to take away all this speed and all the size that the receivers have on the outside. We've got to find a way to limit that. Because if you don't, if you allow Ole Miss to stay balanced, if you allow them to run the ball effectively, if you allow Jackson Dart to go deep and beat you deep every single play, just like he did against Arkansas last week, it's going to be a very long day and maybe a shocking result for some of us on Saturday. So find a way to make Ole Miss a little bit more one-dimensional. Find a way to make one aspect of their offense almost a non-factor. Preferably you do that against the pass. And look, you're not going to completely shut down Jackson Dart. You're not going to completely take the pass out of the game. But I think the biggest message that you guys send if you're Kirby Smart is let's limit the big explosive plays. Make those open field tackles. Do not get beat deep. Let's not let Ole Miss score within, a 5-play drive, go 80 yards in 5 plays. Let's milk this thing out. Let's make sure we can slow down this offense, and maybe conversely, offensively, take some longer drives yourselves to keep that Ole Miss offense off the field. That's kind of the strategy I think you got to do if you're Kirby Smart in Georgia on Saturday. Ole Miss, on the other hand, their defense is pretty underrated. I don't think people realize how good this Ole Miss defense is. We focus so much on how high-octane, how fast and explosive the offense is. The defense is 22nd in the nation, giving up just 316 yards per game. They're second in the nation against the run, allowing just 82 rushing yards per game. But the funny thing about that is that's a great stat. It doesn't matter for this game because Georgia can't run the ball. At least they can't run it that well. Georgia, if they want to win, they're going to have to rely on the arm of Carson Beck. They're going to have to rely on him to not make turnovers. They're going to have to rely on him to deliver. The running game, they'll try to run, but I don't think they're going to have much success against this Ole Miss front seven. But the Rebels are allowing over 230 passing yards per game. And Carson Beck is arguably the best quarterback that Ole Miss has seen this season. Arguably. Second best would be Garrett Nussmeier against LSU. Ole Miss lost that game to Nussmeier in Death Valley, and Nussmeier had 337 passing yards on the day. They allowed 365 total passing yards to Arkansas, and yes, the Razorbacks were playing from behind for the majority of the game, really much all the game, but still 365 passing yards to the Razorbacks. Even 243 passing yards they allowed to Brock Vandegrift, who's been absolutely terrible with Kentucky this year. So they've played some decent quarterbacks, and by decent, some of them below average, and haven't fared that well against them. Can they do that again now, or will they do that again now against, again, one of the best quarterbacks they've seen all year, probably the best they've seen in Carson Beck? Do they have another poor performance in the secondary with these Georgia wide receivers, which are underrated, with this quarterback in Carson Beck, who's underrated and has taken a lot of flack because of his interception problem? The Ole Miss pass rush, though, is something to watch out for. This is a team that has 42 sacks on the season. So you take a Georgia team that can't run the ball that well, is going to be somewhat one-dimensional throwing the ball, Carson Beck having turnover problems. If he's constantly under pressure, he's going to make some mistakes, or he's going to put Georgia in some second, third, and long situations, which completely screws up your drive. 42 sacks on the year already for Ole Miss. If they can find a way to pressure him, they will win this game. They will win this game, no doubt about it. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Big game, Saturday afternoon in Oxford. It feels like a toss-up. Vegas views it as a toss-up. What is Georgia? Like a 2.5-point favorite, maybe a 3-point favorite, if that. And that's just slightly favored on the road against Ole Miss. Ole Miss has looked really good at times this year, has not looked that great at other times this year. Which team's going to show up? Again, they look great against Arkansas, but that was just Arkansas. They looked great at the beginning of the season, but anybody can look good against like Furman and Wake Forest and Middle Tennessee and guys like that. Didn't look great against Kentucky. Didn't look great against LSU. What do we see from them now? Same for Georgia. At times they've looked really good. Last week against Florida, everybody's going to point to that Florida game and go, with a third-string quarterback, the Bulldogs were in a dogfight. The Bulldogs were only up by a touchdown late in the fourth quarter. I will say some of that attributes to the interceptions from Carson Beck. Florida scored 10 points, easy points, from Carson Beck turnovers. If he limits the turnovers, Georgia wins. And here's the last thing on this. Lane Kiffin does not fare well in big games. Since Lane Kiffin took over at Ole Miss, the Rebels have hosted, in Oxford, four top 10 teams. Kiffin is 1-3 in those games. The only win was against number 7 Kentucky back in 2022. 1-3 at home against top 10 teams, and the only one was against Kentucky. That's alarming to me. He has struggled against, the Alabamas, the Georgias, at times the LSUs. I think he's going to struggle again on Saturday against Georgia. This Georgia team is still one of the best in the country. The last time we kind of counted Georgia out was a few weeks ago when they went on the road to Texas. A lot of us, including myself, picked Texas to win that game, and Georgia curb stomped them. It was a big, big blowout. It may not look like it in the score, but it was. It was a domination from the Bulldogs. I don't think they dominate Ole Miss on Saturday, but I do think they win. Give me Georgia to still prove they are the top dog, literally, in the SEC. They come on the road. They slow down Ole Miss. The Bulldogs win this game, still remain at the top of the SEC standings, still remain as a first-round bye team in the college football playoff. And with this win, and really I should say with this loss, Ole Miss will take their third loss of the year, practically eliminating themselves from the college football playoff race, resulting in what has been a very disappointing season for Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of those exclusive expert picks. Some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers each of the last 6 years, including this year as well. Go sign up today. Again, the link down below over on thegridironexpert.com. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.